Welcome to One Breath, where we bring voices of wisdom, resilience, and leadership to the mic. Today we are honored to speak with Jefferson Green, chief of the Wasco Tribe, one of the 3 tribes that make up the Confederated Tribes of Warm Springs in Oregon. Jefferson is not only a respected tribal leader, but also a language warrior, cultural educator, and advocate for healing in Native communities. In this conversation, we'll explore what it means to lead in today's world while carrying the weight of history, how culture and language are tools for survival, and how Jefferson's own journey, shaped by both beauty and struggle, has led him to become the leader he is today. Start us off, Jefferson. What does it mean to you personally to serve as chief of the Wasco Tribe, and how do you carry that responsibility in today's world?
Thank you for that. Yes, it's quite a job to have. It's nothing that you can go to school for. It's a lifelong training position, I would say. And maybe other chiefs would feel something different, but I really appreciate. I'm a student of life. I'm a student of the culture. I'm a student of our heritage, and I'm a student of the community. I'm looking to be formulated into someone great, not just for the community, but for my wife, for my children, my nieces, my nephews, and that requires a lot of experience, moment to moment, day to day, season to season, and reflecting on all of those hurdles, reflection on all of those celebrations. How do you humbly celebrate? How do you kindly correct? How do you sincerely remind, so that we're constantly picking people up left and right, and it's unfortunate. And I have to be really careful about when I speak about certain subject matters. But I guess I could say, not all of us, have the mentors, when we're growing up. We don't always have the guidance. A lot of times, our parents, our community people, we're so busy. We've got so much responsibilities, and sadly, a lot of our generation are left with, you'll figure it out, And I think in a way, I certainly was able to grow up in that, but I've taken some hard falls. I've taken some, whether that be through my addictions, and whether that be educationally, whether that be physically, even. Mentally, spiritually, all kinds of different things. And getting back to this, question of what does it take, it takes an open mind. It definitely takes an open mind to be able to hear everybody out, from a 7-year-old all the way to a 70-plus-year-old, being able to give them that time, that sincere ear, to really understand, what is it that people want to share? What do they want to teach me, even? I've been corrected a lot of times in life, and I've taken those corrections to heart, and some of them may not have always came nicely, and we shouldn't expect that of everyone. But I think that a lot of correction and reminders are also a good sense of indication that someone cares. They care about you. They care about your actions. They care about your leadership. They care about your presence. Whether it sounds like it or not, their words are saying it, and you just got to kind of read between the lines. And I think that's a big part of some of these jobs, being a leader of the community, a leader in the ceremony, and even that sincere ability to close your eyes and let the words just come out of you. My days start with prayer. I pray about 3 times a day, just seeking comfort, seeking sincerity, seeking growth. It's a constant prayer of growth every single day. Yeah, even yesterday, someone gave me some information that really wasn't great information, and I had to think about it, and anybody would have loved to respond, and I said, I'm just going to sleep on it. I'm going to sleep on it, and tomorrow's another day. It's a whole different sunrise, and I feel way better today. And I think that it's okay to remind folks to kind of take a moment and let these moments come, let the season provide, and let your heart grow constantly.
Can you describe your upbringing in Warm Springs? What were some of the values or lessons you learned early on from your family and community?
Yeah, so I was born in Jefferson County, ironically, and raised on the Warm Springs Indian Reservation over in Dry Creek Valley. My grandfather was my first mentor that I could ever remember, and I was glued to his hip till I was about 7 or 6. Traveling in his truck, checking on horses, checking on cattle. He was also a logger as well. I don't remember that part, but I do remember him being kind of a leader at that time too. I remember, probably 15, 20 plus men standing around in a circle and listening to my grandpa, talk and give guidance, give some leadership. Whether that was in the woods and on the plateau with horses and cows, and that really fit in my lingo too. When I was being able to talk at the age of 6 and 7, I was trying to copy, the way he talked and what he talked about. And it was unfortunate one day, we got a call, and next thing you know, we're at the hospital and he was gone. And so I then was glued to my grandmother's hip, who always knew her as a loving person. I don't know that I was always with her until then. When that happened, then I was always with my grandmother. And she had a very different lifestyle. Very ceremonial, food gatherer, preservationist when it come to food. We were always drying food on racks and building a fire to dry food, gathering food, giving a lot of community talks on culture, language, singing the songs. I was a dancer. More kids started moving into the house. So then there was the 3 of us living with our grandparents. And then when my grandmother started to fall ill, more kids started showing up because now there are more adults. So we all grew up as brothers and sisters, attending the same ceremonies around the same elders. And we had to sit quietly on the side while elders shared their wisdom to not only us, of course, to the whole community, everyone that was attending those services, those ceremonies. And I wish I had a very keen heart and mind at that time, and guidance to be constantly reminded about, listen to what they're saying, try to understand what they're talking about. Take it all in, put it in your heart. You're going to have to always remember what they're talking about. And so being around, there might have been some things that were repetitive, and I remember those things. But as time went on, I was just very familiar with those circles. We would be there at my grandparents', and then we'd be at other ceremonies with other leaders. And Sundays were at the Longhouse. That was really all we knew. The only time we dressed up for a powwow was for Payumsha. But one year I ended up dancing at another powwow, and I took 3rd. That was a cool experience. But Longhouse was number 1, and Sweat House, of course, and then Gathering, of course. But some of the other cultural events that we have nowadays, I'm just not familiar with some of those, because that wasn't our upbringing. It was just Columbia Plateau, Columbia River Tribe's original culture is the way we grew up. And then later on in the years, more guidance. I just didn't have it. But I managed to graduate from high school and ended up in college. I'm not quite sure where that came from. I think maybe hanging out with some of the non-native people that I knew. They were all going to college, so I assumed that's what we should do. So I just applied to a community college. It was really, as long as I had college in the name, it was good. I didn't care if it was a university. I didn't care really what the title of it was, to be honest. What was funny too is I applied to Mount Hood Community College because I thought it was on Mount Hood, the mountain. And I was like, oh, that's just right at the edge of the reservation. I'll just go there. And then come to find out it was in Gresham, Oregon. You know, like this is just wild. That's how disconnected from that educational part I was, right? And so when they're like, all right, so you're moving to Gresham, I'm like, Gresham? I'm going to Mount Hood. Yeah, that's in Gresham by Portland. I'm moving to Portland, so I was like, I guess I'm going to Portland. You know, that like that's just was wild. So I ended up going there for 2 years, and then and I was very disconnected from the culture, from the community. I left one way, never came back, and but though I think third year into college, I transferred to Portland State University, and I was asked to come back for a feast. I think it was maybe even a funeral or something, and I found myself reflecting on like, the ceremony looks a little different. You know, after all these years growing up there, and it looks a little different, and I would just kind of notice that, and then maybe months pass, maybe a year would pass, and I'd be back there again, be like, it looks different. It feels a little different. There's not as much people. There's not as much participants, as much drummers. Like, I wonder what's going on. I remember this and I remember that. And I think, anybody could have taken, a critical hat, but instead I was like thinking to myself, like, if I'm familiar with it, I should help out, whether it be holding the broom, holding the mop, serving water. If I remember it goes a certain way, then I should help keep those the essences of those there by participating. So probably a few months later, I ended up at this really small home service and ceremony, and was jokingly handed a drum that I'd never ever held in my life, and was like, "Here, we're there's not enough of us. You're gonna have to help out." They meant it as a joke, and I just said, "Sure, I'll give it a shot." And so that experience too was one of those embarrassing falls, being publicly, showcased on my own will, not theirs, on my own will, that I did not know a song, right? Because then you sing them in order, and it gets to your turn, and everyone's looking at you, and like, I got to start somewhere. So I started making sounds, really. Who knows, and it kind of just kept going with it, because then you don't want to look like you don't know the song. I don't know. It was, looking back on it, it was just quite the ordeal to me. Maybe even to them too. Like, holy, this guy's really giving it a shot, and he doesn't know. But that experience still pushed me to, into that. You better try to figure it out. Like, this is a part of where you come from. You've been here how many times in your life, and now here's this opportunity to keep that part of you alive. And so I went down that path. I was still in college, but I ended up coming back and was attending the ceremonies a lot more, learning, and I'd go back to college, and I'd come back and, still attend the ceremonies. And then when I got out of college, it was probably 2008, and I immediately was drumming then at that point, all the time. And it was really interesting too, because I was 22, 21, somewhere in there when I first started drumming, and everybody else that was helping must have been like 40, maybe 35, youngest, right? And for so many years, I was thinking like, dang, I'm the youngest one here all the time. Even at the age of 21, 22, 23, 24. Youngest one all the time. Even when I got into 25, 26, 27, 28, just the youngest one all the time. Like, there just really wasn't a lot of young people that were really interested in helping, at that. And I'm not criticizing. That just was the reality, right? Life is busy, and there's a lot of different, avenues in the world nowadays. And so I was just there. And then this opportunity came to start teaching the youth these songs, and this program fell into my lap. to share culture songs with the youth. And I was really nervous about it because not knowing the language and who validates and certifies me to teach culture and language, and so ended up just putting my best foot forward and saying, all right, I'll teach you a song, right? So I taught a song, then that turned into a dance, and before you know it, I was like a cultural instructor, and I did stumble around in those days too, just like, because there's folks that are encouraging you, and then there's those that it's a community of there's a lot of different parts of the community, right? And so sometimes those that are carrying boulders and weight, they want to share that, like, hey, you should carry this too. And they might throw a boulder in your path and you kind of got to stumble over it a little bit. But I think it just kind of made me a little bit better at navigating, the road. Like, oh, here comes a boulder. Geez, I'm just going to step to the side, and I'll just kind of go around it a little bit, but also humbly and respectfully, acknowledging these hurdles and still carrying forward, because when the community is relying on you to serve a position, you don't just step down and say, yeah, never mind, right? That doesn't instill hope. You're like, well, everyone's going to criticize me, then I'm just not going to do it. If they're just going to challenge me at every single turn, I'm just not going to do it. Like, that's not what the community needs is, people stepping down, we need more people stepping up, no matter what. So that's where we're at.
Well, thank you for that.
My upbringing, right?
Yeah.
And still growing. Jeez, catch me next week. Get whole different stories, right?
Freaking 5 minutes longer.
Yeah, serious.
Growing up, did you witness the effects of drugs or alcohol around you? And how did those experiences shape the person you became?
Yeah, I would say I was tried to be a straight arrow, because I did see a lot of it, here and there, whether family or not, and lovingly, I might as well count. I did have 2 uncles that were sober, and an aunt or 2. And our family is pretty big. And I was devastated, when I found out that some of our community members and family members were functional users, we could say that. And I was devastated because at that time I was, like absolute, sobriety and just go to school, play sports, and don't get in trouble. And all my friends, all my cousins, they were all experimenting and things. And I would probably be around, but not really, indulging, so to say. And I'm not quite sure, really what it was that ended up experimenting with different things. And thank God I didn't experiment with everything. So I can certainly stand forward and say, absolutely never done that. There's a whole bunch of things I did not do. So I'm really happy for that. But still looking back at the things that I did, was introduced to, I think that a couple of things that I could feel it. You could feel it in your body. You could feel it in your mind. You could feel it in your physical ability. Some of the substances that they just damper you. They harder to get up, harder to talk, harder to think. And me being a straight arrow all the way until I was probably 15, 16. And then now I was stumbling along mentally, spiritually, physically, emotionally, just trying to fit in, fear of missing out. And I would still reflect on, I don't like to feel this way, because right? You get these little experiences of smiles, laughters, and whatever, and then you just you start going back down, and then when you're on the downfall, you're just kind of like, I don't like feeling like this. It's just anyway. And I think even that was a learning, part for me too, because I've only tried out of all of the options, I guess, that exist, even way more now. But in those days, out of all the options, I've only done 4 things in my life, and one of those 4 things, geez, my age now has been 20 years, since I've ever touched anything like that. And then it was kind of getting around the time too, though, around when Oregon was starting to legalize and treat patients with some of those substances that we were using. And so it kind of made it feel like, well, the doctors are giving it out, right? And so it was just a real funny time. And so, that other part too, man, I was around like drinking and driving, even as a young kid. I wouldn't say it was normal, but I knew the relatives that did that. And I remember even one time we were here and ended up being here in Madras, and we got a call late at night and came over, and a couple of my uncles were just banged to all heck. And you could just smell the alcohol, but you could also see the pain that they were in. Just it just wasn't a good sight, right, in the ER. And thank God they lived. But I was probably only 4 or 3 when I had seen that. And then come to my time when I started experimenting, then I now had probably a permit to drive. It was remembering, like, I know all kinds of people, since being a little guy, that you're in a rural community, you drink, you drive, you hang out. You want to go somewhere, get something, and you use and you drive and you hang out. And I never thought that it was like okay, but I seen it so much when I was a kid that just was what spilled in, right? And I'm not blaming anybody. That was just what everybody seemed to be doing at that time. Again, all my friends, I knew family members, I knew community members. So then, sadly, I got a DUI right out of high school. Super embarrassing. And then a couple of years later, I still didn't learn, right? I was just like, if I could just do it more responsibly, right? You get these thoughts like, I could beat this. Like, I remember so-and-so, they did this for so many years, and they never got caught. So I just need to do it more, responsibly. Who knows, right? And when you're stuck in that mode, you really don't know what responsible is, So I've definitely had those stumbles too. Yeah. But eventually, man, I had to pick it up, I think, and what's weird too is nowadays, I don't think that there's enough information out there about drinking and driving. In those days, you were required to attend more classes, and you'd have to hear these stories, from people all the time. And that was even after my second DUI, right? And I really appreciated that education at that time. And from what I hear, is that they don't require, offenders to go to get all that education anymore. I'm not really quite sure. So, but yeah, that's kind of, my experience with drugs and alcohol and seeing it around. And I thank God, my kids, they've never seen me in those, conditions. My oldest one, he's 19. When he was a little guy, right, he might probably remember, when I was still lost. But you know, it's a long time ago.
My fault. It's just you're giving all these really nice long answers, and I'm just really immersed into it.
Yeah.
The stories. Was there ever a moment in your life where you had to make a deliberate choice to stay on a different path away from substances, negative influences, or cycles of trauma?
Yeah, I'm on that right now. Still. I think if it wasn't for my job and my line of work, I'd be this, hobbit, just at home, just kind of watching YouTube or something like that. So I'm very appreciative of the line of work that I do, because I do work in language, I work in culture, and help with ceremonies, and help our tribe, go forward as best we can. But yeah, and I love hanging out with you guys. I love hanging out with other sober people. I love being around sober events. I love laughing around. I love and I have to kind of push myself, because sometimes I'll stop at every billboard I can to try to find a community event. Just to keep me reminded that you could still be sober and have a good time, because for a lot of years it was elsewhere. You didn't have to go to Flyer, you just go to the party, right? And it's way different nowadays.
How have the effects of addiction in your community influenced your perspective as a cultural leader today?
Yeah. Not to make a really long story, you're right. And I'm a little cautious to share too much, so I got to kind of be thoughtful on when I first picked up a drum. It wasn't there wasn't a criteria, right? There wasn't the background check. There wasn't the sobriety dates. There wasn't all that. It was really just, do you have the courage to help out, right? So I started helping out, and I don't know that I was particularly lost. I just was more focused on school. I was focused on getting good grades. I was focused on completing a degree. And then whenever chance I got, I would be drumming and helping out with ceremonies. And there was a time that I was, again, being the youngest one in this crew, so to say. And I'm not calling them out. There's people that probably use responsibly, never been in trouble. I'm sure they exist, right? And I'm not justifying, but that's just not me. That's not me. And so we were at this event, and there was these way much older guys, elders to me, and they were indulging at this public event, and they weren't getting rowdy. I can assure you that they weren't getting crazy, but it kind of set in my mind, well, they're functional users participating in ceremonies and culture. Maybe that could be me. But I would never drink at that event, So I was very mindful and cognizant of that. And as time went on, I still was leaning on those guys to teach me, to share, and to guide, in the culture. Never ever questioned, about their sobriety or anything like that. Because after going to that, I already knew they probably do responsibly use here and there, And they were my teachers, so. And I never ever indulged with them either. So we would have these conversations, and they just got me so far culturally, ceremoniously. They had years of drumming, attending, and And again, this isn't all of them. Absolutely not all of them. There was a good portion of them that were definitely sober, and we would be traveling together. And then later on in life, there was a term that came out that culture is prevention. And I absolutely love that term. It's got a great ring to it. And just kind of being transparent and clear. I guess anybody should rightfully seek clarification, right? And it's like, well, we don't really ask people for their sobriety dates to go fish, to go hunt, to go pick, to go dig, to go powwow. You really just invite them there. It's a great circle for them to be participating in. There might have been many years ago where sometimes individual or two or few or whatever would maybe show up under the influence in something, but just kind of getting back to this, like that's that's just not part of the circle, and maybe in the future it will be. I'm not saying it should be or anything like that. And going back to that, it does have a great ring to it, and I think lovingly and kindly. And again, I've had a lot of thought about this. Is we like to treat things very black and white. You're like, you're sober, so you're well, and you're living the light. You're healthy, and you're respectable and admirable. And sometimes, like lovingly, coming from a community of trauma, it's sometimes it might feel like we're putting people on a pedestal, and some people on that pedestal could have a tendency to throw a few stones here and there, like, oh, I've been well, I've been healthy, I've been sober for 2 weeks, 3 months, 1 year, 10 years. It's those guys that are lost. It's those guys are the darkness. Those guys are the evil. Those guys are irresponsible. And so getting back to that, this part on is we really have gotten away from instilling hope, in people. I think at time coming from a community of trauma, like we find it hard to put a hand on someone's shoulder and say, I still believe in you, and we really got to get in that direction, and say, hey man, you know what? You've taken a fall. Gosh, I've lived 40 years. You should hear my falls. But I got back up, you could still do it, and we really got to get to that. And I think, getting to when it gets to culture, that culture could absolutely be prevention, and it's the mentality, the positive presence, that we offer people to be a part of our ceremonies, a part of the circles, that's longevity. When you're teaching people to throw shots and pick up stones just because you feel like you've earned it for 2 weeks of sobriety, I mean, that's not longevity. We want people to aspire to be a part of this positive circle of sobriety, and so I might be getting a little, veering off, here and there. But that's what I just foresee, seeing, different uses and abuses, or just indulges, so to say, throughout circles. And I think, kindly, every walk of life, not just culture, every walk of life could use some sobriety. Every walk of life could use some positivity. Every walk of life could use some hope, right? It's right. And just, being, who I am in the community and culturally, people might say like, oh, wow, yeah, he's in, is your practice in culture, you're at the Longhouse, so that's where you go for hope and enlightenment. But really, I mean, prayer is just not for, the leaders. Prayer is not just for the ceremony. Prayer is not just for the Longhouse. Meditation, hope, and manifestation of positivity, that should be everywhere, right? We should be teaching our youth about self-care, and at a very young age. Like, hey, I know you're only 8, but you could put positive energies. You could speak positive self-talk, even at the age of 8, even at the age of 12. You got to learn that, instill it in your life. Culturally, I guess I could speak too on, our belief is that everyone's born with a light. So at the time of creation, conception, that we believe that you, the light is already there. It's two spirits coming together, and they create another life. And the light is then put, and then the first thing that starts to happen is there's a heartbeat, and the body is formed. And so those two are the very first thing of creation. And then when at birth and the baby comes out, we're all, getting to know this person, and their character, their spirit begins to show, and that begins to, that's their personality. And then we'd give them their Indian names according to who they are, their light, their spirit, how they carry themselves. And that light is just always a part of every single one of us on earth. That light is there. Whether we're going through addiction, whether we're going through happiness, sadness, depression, loss, grief, all of that stuff, the light is always there. It might go dim on really, really hard times, but it never, ever goes out. And I believe, like, if people knew about nurturing that light, that positive self-talk, that encouragement, that the motivation to just get up, to rise and say, you know what, there's another moment today, there's another opportunity today. What am I going to do today? What am I going to do with my light? What am I going to do with my life? How am I going to take care of me so I can take care of you, so I can share it with you, and etc. And that light begins to radiate. It illuminates. Like, and we have this rhythm, right? It comes right from the earth. And that rhythm is in our body every single day. It goes, we get excited, we get tired, and this rhythm just stays. It's our vibration. And when we walk around in life, there's some people, that's where that saying comes, like, I like your vibe, I like your aura, I like your presence. That's what they're talking about. They're talking about your light. They're talking about the good, energy that you bring, right? And people overlook that part. That's what they're talking about. They're talking about, just the presence that you bring, and it's that light, that hope. Everybody's born with it. And sometimes we delve around in different things and we damper it, but it doesn't go out. It just kind of goes, it just goes dim for a little while in our life. And it's something that we can nurture every single day,
Say I like that. The Wasco people have a deep connection to the Columbia River. What stories or cultural teachings from your people continue to guide your leadership?
Yeah, so the Wasco territory, it's pretty vast. And there was a time that we never ever had these boundaries, right? There was some overlap with different tribes, different languages, different beliefs and ceremonial systems. And the stronger tribes were numbers. The stronger tribes had the ability to find the resources, utilize those resources for longevity, prosperity, and survival. And so when it comes to the Wasco people, I could speak to, their territory is a gray area, but could span to Celilo Village and beyond, across the river to like Wishram, Washington, and beyond. All the way to the Portland, even to the mouth of the Columbia River. There's quite similar languages, exist there. So even there and beyond, through the Cascade Mountains south to the Cascade Mountains north, and there's a lot of things that not only the Wasco people witnessed themselves, there was a lot of things that were witnessed by the people before them. The people that didn't look like us. And in our culture, the very first people was, even the fire, the mountains, the wind, the rain, the sun, all of those. It was a very small community at that time. And even the seasons, they were considered the people. They were the entities. They were the energies. And those first people, all of them, they witnessed a lot of different things before they ever got to us. And I think these stories they all remind us, because there's a lot of things that have happened, right? In those moments, in those seasons, in those years, right? Coming back to what we're talking about right now, all of those experiences that led up to how we got here today. Because even after them, there was more seasons that was added than there was the plant people. They experienced a lot of things too, a lot of really great things, but also really hard things that they lived through. Eruptions and fire and rain and water and shaking and all of these things, but they still prospered. Those people continued to teach the next generation of people, which were the people that had eyes and legs and feet and wings even. And they had to learn from those the very first people. And they also experienced a lot of different things, different seasons, different years, different moments. But they still prospered. They changed their coats of fur. They changed the thickness of their skin. They changed how they interacted with the environment. Like they constantly moved. They constantly grew, right? And that community, all of those generations of people then taught our generations of people, the Wasco people, about what has happened. How many seasons come? How many hard times did those first generations experience to get to where we were then, right? So we were these children of the earth, just learning from those first generations on how to make it through the hard times, how to humble ourselves that we don't own the mountains, we don't own the water, we don't own the trees, we don't own the air. These things are always been here. And we just live in harmony with it, and the prosperity will be there naturally. Just living in harmony, taking care of yourself, taking care of things, not taking so much, not indulging so much, because you're going to need it next year, you're going to need it next month, next season. The generations are going to need those roots, those medicines, those flowers, those, that its longevity is in the preservation and collective, unified, honorable harvesting. Not taking so much and just carrying on and carrying on. But going back to the prayer, humbly thanking a tree for letting you take a bark, humbly thanking a fish for taking it out the water, humbly thanking the winter for bringing the snow. Like all of those little things was part of our culture, our ceremonies on just remembering you don't own this territory. The territory is taking care of you and you live in harmony with it. And so that's what's related to this position, right? It does have some responsibilities when it comes to policy and ordinances and codes and all that, and I'm a student to that still, and when it comes to the cultural side, I've had to live that for my whole life and still living it, right? There's still a season that's going to come that has some great lessons in that too. And that's okay, So.
Language is at the heart of cultural survival. What has your work in language revitalization taught you about healing and reclaiming identity?
Yeah. So I have to be, full disclosure, I'm not fluent in the Kiksh Wasco language. The amazing teachers that do exist today, they are probably very high fluent. And in comparison to their teachers and elders, they may have different perspectives on how fluent they are in comparison. And I'm not at liberty to speak on that part so much. But of the 4 or 5 of those teachers, they speak the Kiksh language as a second language. And there's a lot of different reasons that why the Kiksh language is in the state that it is nowadays. Where I grew up on the reservation, and the ceremonies that we were doing, they were Wasco ceremonies, while also Ichishkin ceremonies. And it was a collaboration of 2 cultures. And a lot of the elders of that time, though, spoke Ichishkin. Even though it was a collaboration of 2 cultures, a lot of the language that was shared, which we did hear Kiksh here and there, and those were all just by elder, folks. And so, and the Ichishkin that we did hear was amongst also elders. So even in my time, it was kind of viewed as like it's a language for old people, right? And I mean that with respect. Like, and when we use the word old, it's not out of disrespect, because when we talk about things like we're talking about the old trees, the old ways, the old beings, the old times, the old teachings, we mean it with utmost respect. And in English, it sounds harsh, but in our culture, it's not. It's a very respectable generation. So the language was a thing for the old people, right? And it was something that maybe we will acquire when we're old. And sadly, that time didn't come. The elders, they sadly passed on, and so many of them, and for even the Paiute language, had worked diligently to record and document the language and share how it works as best they could. And we're still working on all of that. It's not an overnight job for sure. So going back to the story of when I picked up the drum, I was familiar with songs. I could say that. I was very familiar growing up in the culture. I was familiar with songs. And some of those songs are what we'd call a straight song. It just has harmony. And it goes up and down, and some a little bit what some would call a testimonial song, where it has words. And of course, even the harmony songs, those are testimonies too. And that's a whole other long story too. But some of the testimony songs with the language in it, I probably was able to carry on, because you have a drummer to my left, a drummer to my right, people singing in front, singing in back, etc. So you kind of could pick up some of the words or pronunciations, I should say, and carry forward. Well, then I was challenged on even that, rightfully, because now I was teaching youth some of these songs because they wanted to learn, right? And they felt safe, they felt comfortable to ask. Maybe they were in a longhouse, maybe they weren't. Either way, Jefferson, could you help us with a song? Some of them had words, some of them didn't. Well, it came to the ones with words, for instance, those words are all in Nitchishkin. So I was sharing these songs. Did I have the right? Did I have the certification? Did I have the real validation to be teaching those songs? So that was really bold of me. Definitely not stupid, but really bold, for me to just say, these kids want to learn. It's a part of their identity. It's part of their pride. It's part of their walk. Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and help these kids out, have a sense of place. And so here they were prospering in the culture through the songs. And before you know it, 2 years in, now they're singing 10, 15 songs. And elders are like, that sounds great and all, but they don't speak the language and you don't either. So how do you know what you're even singing about? Some of these songs are about death. Some of them are about celebration. Some of them are about this whole other life that's after this life. Some of them are about living. And you're not teaching them that. That's the testimonial part. And you're just totally skipping over that. You're just giving them a drum, teaching them a song, and sending them out. Right? It's deeper than that. And I appreciated that. I didn't take it to heart. I continued teaching. But it got harsher, It got harsher when it's like, yeah, it's all good and all, but you don't know the language. Yeah, it's all good and all, but you don't know what you're singing about. You want to be this teacher, this cultural instructor, but you don't know what you're doing, So a couple of years, I heard, a lot of these different stones being thrown here and there. I didn't take offense. I just kept it moving. It still was this void was like building, right? And also a challenge was just continuing like this challenge of bricks. Like, remember, you don't know nothing. There's a brick. Remember, you don't know the language. There's a brick. Remember, you don't even know what the song means. There's a brick. Remember, so it was like, am I going to wait until this big old wall of bricks is in front of me? Or am I going to go ahead and start trying to find these little pieces that I can what is this one then? What's the significance of this song? What's the meaning of this word that I probably am mispronouncing? So I ended up, taking language classes. I went right to the director of the language program, and I was like, I know you have employees. Like, is there a job around here that I could like apply for? And they were like, there's no jobs right now. You could just keep taking the classes though. So I was like, well, if anything, I wouldn't mind working here. If I was working somewhere else at the time, and was like, but if you guys are paying people to practice culture and learn language, like that sounds like a cool gig too. So sure enough, patience lives within, and 6 months later, I was being paid to be around elders. I think I was doing just the culture camps at that time, so I would do these culture camps and programs and everything, and then they said, "Hey, we have an opportunity for you to be with the elders every single day," and that's it. That's all you would do. You would just be with the elders to learn the language. And again, this was the Ichishkin language, and so I ended up being with them, for 3 years. I took a fluency test and tested really high. Then I got a license to teach, a certification, and ended up teaching in public schools, the language. But then that also opens up another, realization. Like, there's only so many hours in a day. There's only so many weeks in a year, school year. And you guys are pumping this class with 180 students, a week. How efficient is this really in preserving the language? Like, they're leaving with the ability to count to 10, a few animals, a couple of greetings, maybe introduction. And I taught like that for, 2 years, doing the very best I can, to second graders all the way to eighth graders and a little bit of high school. And after 2 years, like, I wasn't able to hold a conversation with any of the students. I could talk with elders, so we were talking the language. And sadly, they weren't getting any younger, the elders. And we had sadly lost a couple of our instructors, my instructors. And going back to, it's just not enough time in the day or in the year for that matter. And so I just did some soul searching and a lot of prayers, and it just said, figure out a way to be with your teachers more often. And teaching is not getting you there. And there's a great opportunity to learn more, but here I was teaching more all the time, and not developing my own, fluency and consistency. So sure enough, the creator said to start a nonprofit and to start working on getting that time with the elders. So that's where the path I took, and have been on that path for 5 years now. Yeah. Running our nonprofit and working with elders, learning the language, developing curriculum, and so.
Awesome sauce.
Yeah.
Let's get away from the phone real quick. On the kids, would you be able to tell me, like, how much they have advanced in your eyes, and how soon do you think they're gonna be able to get towards that fluent level?
Mm-hmm.
Would you want to see if adults would be able to learn more easier? Mm-hmm. Would you hold classes for adults, and then would you then in turn, after teaching the adults, have them help you teach kids?
No, absolutely great. So our kids class is actually only 6 students. So we're collaborating with other families to bring in those students. And so even for me, my kids, I have 4 students, so to say, but 2 of them are part of the 6. And so we're immersing them in the language with the help and support of those parents and those families. So there's only 4 of us families collaborating for these 6 students, right? One family has 1, another family has 2, and another family has 2, so it's like 6 total. And that's only a couple times a week for mornings, right? So, and that's just very brand new. So that just started this summer. The biggest classes that we're doing actually are for adults, because the longevity is in more teachers also. So the classes that we're doing for adults are the speaking class and the songs classes. Um, but as you probably know too, we're also doing the youth songs class, which is down at the new YM Youth Center. So we've been doing that twice a week. But sadly, when unfortunate events in the community happen, then we have to cancel or postpone for another week, and that's another whole other beast and topic. And that one we're just teaching the songs. That one we posted them, we put them on a projector. They see the words, they see what they mean, the translations, but we also have to talk to spirituality. We talk about, the testimony. We talk about the orchestration of ceremonies, the creation stories, because that was a long thing. Even for me to kind of get into that, I made sure that everyone knew that I just didn't think it was right anymore to just say, all right, well, let's go ahead and learn the song. Like, we had to go way back to the beginning, and I think that was just 2 days, 5 hours long total of just talking to creation, the very beginning, like the heartbeat, like we might think of, oh, just hold the drum and just hit it and you're good. But why is the drum a circle? Why does the drum have to be made of deer hide? Why do we call the drumstick the one pavas? Why do we only hold it with our left? Why are there 7 drummers? Why are there word songs and straight songs? Why, like all of those things, there's so much that goes into, and what I think, and that's what those people were telling me, many years ago. Like, here you are, just giving them a drum and teaching them a song, not even testifying to life, So that's why that song, at the YMU Center, it feels slow, because the essence has to be instilled, right? Because if we're just giving them drums, then culture isn't prevention, right? It's just an option, You could do culture and prevention's the option, Or you can be sober, but culture's the option, And how do we mold those two? And to mold them together, you got to give them the education. They've got to know the essence behind all of it, So going back to these classes, so the speaking class with dinner, that's just for adults, and they bring their kids, but the teaching style is different because we're creating teachers. So to create teachers, you get into the real nitty gritty of how the language works. That's grammatical rules, linguistic analysis, analogy. Why could you attach this piece to this word but not to this word? How come you have to have this piece to use this piece? Like all of that. Those are some real adult things, and the adults really appreciate that part, right? So all of the adults, and I'm talking like we average 20 people per week, all adults, they're getting it. They're like, dang, this is way easier than going with phrase memorization, because we've done that for many years, decades. As long as you can say Nich Pachwai, Mishnah Moi, like those are phrase memorizations, phrase chunks. You can only get by for so long in a conversation. So we're not ripping apart the language, so to say. We're just deciphering it in a way that our adults could create their own sentences, and put it all together. It was really hard for me. Respectfully, I should also convey that in my early times, I had this vast vocabulary of plants and numbers and colors and animals, but couldn't say that the brown bear is walking from this rock over the creek to that rock. No ability whatsoever. But if you came and asked, like, say, how do you say stick? How do you say rock? How do you say Friday? I could answer all of that. But, all right, now tell me a sentence. Like, Nope, not at all. Right. So for me to do that, I was just like, and I could see the frustration on some of our elders and teachers. You know, you could just feel it. You could sense it. You know, it's like they would challenge us too. Like, can you just say that you're sitting on the chair? And you'd hear crickets. You know, and it'd be like, man, we've been here for months. You guys can't even say that you're going to Madras. So that's when I was like, I need to figure something else out, man. You know, so I ended up finding some books on the language, two of them in particular, on the Etruscan language, and I just delved into like, well, what are the Xiapo people? What were they writing about the language? I want to see what was it that they were looking at and studying and analyzing for them to learn phrases. I want to see what they're looking at. So I delved into that, and I was so fascinated about seeing how they see the language is working. And then I would ask the elders, like, hey, so if I use this, then I'd have to say it like that. And they're like, yeah. Like, but if I say it like this, it would also mean this. And like, yeah. But if you say it like that, it also means this in this context. Like, oh, okay, because now we're talking context, perspective, perception, tenses, all of these real fascinating dynamics when it comes to a language. And I just was so hooked. You know, it was an addiction. I'd get up every single day, 5 a.m., and I'd read this book on Green linguistics, grammar, and then I would work through lunch. I was just so stuck on this. And I'd be there after 5 a.m. or after 5 p.m., just stuck, you know, just like reading and studying. And I think within a couple of months, I was already like, it was just coming out, you know, until elders was like, wow, that's you're getting it. Like, so then it was just taken off, and then it became joking with elders in the language, and then I was testing different, in my mind, theories like, could I say inashwa hawlap? Like, yeah, it is grammatically correct, but it's so formal. Then I was like, oh, so there's also a formal and an informal way of talking, like just real nerdy stuff. So that was how, and that's why the adult language is so successful, because it's hard to teach some of that to little guys. You know, like, don't say it that way. That's a little formal. I know you're 8, but you'll figure it out later. You know, you just can't do that, right? And also some of these little guys, they can't write yet. Well, the great part about learning to read and write a language, which is also really brand new to any indigenous language. I think the first time any indigenous language was written was by, I could get the name wrong, but I'll guess anyway. It was either Sequoia or Tecumseh was the first to write their languages. And I'm pretty sure it was Sequoia, who was of the Cherokee Nation, created a whole alphabet for the Cherokee language, 1600s or something like that. But that's very brand new. You're right. And think of indigenous people that have been here for a minimum 30,000 years. And only in the last 400 years has it ever been written by. And for our territory in particularly, the first time Green was written was in 1880 something, 150 years ago, was the first time it was ever written. And it's really unfortunate too when it comes to trauma that there was this taboo about don't write the language, because you know what the Xiapo people do when something's in writing? They take something, right? They want you to sign something, and they're going to learn it and they're going to use it against you, And so for a long time, there was this generation of people that was like, if you're going to learn the language, don't write it because they're going to steal it, And so when I was learning the language too, I was being criticized then too. Like, oh, so you want to write the language, but you don't want to speak the language, But the great part about reading and writing a language was you get the ability to take it home. I mean, because how many of us got a grandma just hanging out at home, like just waiting to teach Jefferson? You know what I mean? And you can't like be like, oh, I know it's after 5, teacher, but can we go to dinner? And they've got lives too, So that gave me the ability to take the language home, study it, understand it, mess with it a little bit, test different theories, and go back. And sometimes I would even show them some of my writings, like, hey, can you test the, does the writing look correct? And not elders have learned to read and write, and that responsibility is not on them. And they shouldn't all have to read and write. Just some of them that were interested in, like, wow, you can write the language, like, so it does have an orthography and writing system in place, and some of them really, really learned to write the language very well, and that was very impressive too. And nowadays, working with some of the elders that I never, rightfully, never learned to write the language, it's interesting because the language could get very long, because when you're writing it phonetically, which is just how it sounds, words can get really, really long. Like, I think one of the longest words that comes to mind is like, I've opened up myself to you for further understanding is kind of what that would come to. But if and it's a single word with like all these prefixes and suffixes attached to these two different, verb roots. And if you wrote that phonetically, already it's this long, but phonetically it's probably like this long, And so that was another reason why I also was like, it's too hard and too big of a challenge to be teaching phrase memorization, because even for that phrase, pamachako paishaksh matash, I had to open myself up to all of you. But if I just open it up to you for this podcast, pamachako paishaksh mash, I'm just opening it up to you. So, and there's so many different contexts to even that word, like you could shorten it a little bit and it'll mean something slightly different, so that's why I'm not too big on phrase memorization, and our adults just super love that stuff. Yeah. The way that we've taught it. So yeah, long answer to where your question. So.
Well, I thank you for that answer. Very knowledgeable, I'd say. Do you feel like there are enough culturally rooted recovery or mental health services available on the reservation, and what still needs to be done?
I think lovingly and respectfully, we don't promote sobriety as a nation. And I think that it's nothing against it or whatsoever. I think that there's a great opportunity to humbly praise sobriety, and share success stories. Allow people to open up, and that's what I mean too. Is about the coming from a community of trauma, is people get really reserved too. It's like, I ain't gonna put myself out there and tell my story. It's just more stones and rocks and arrows, and hopefully through our youth and through our leadership, that we start really humbly guiding a new generation of let people share their story and just absolutely respect it and acknowledge and appreciate that people have been through some stuff, whether you're 10 years old or 80 years old, like, seasons are going to come and go. We're all God's people. We're all children of the earth. But the earth has its seasons too, and we seem to think that some of us are born angels and some of us aren't. And that's just not true. We can all become angels at a certain point, at the time of death. But as of right now, man, we're just, as someone says, we're just a bunch of kids getting older.
I'd say that's a very mature answer. I like it. How do traditional teachings help your community find strength in the face of generational trauma and substance abuse?
Mm. I think that, talking about, the light, talking about that we're born with, and there's been interpretations too that even like our body, our heart and our spirit, that we're kind of just, we're blessed with it. And that at the time of death, we leave our body and our heart here, but our spirit continues on. And then when our spirit gets to that other point, that we're asked, and we have to speak to how we treated our body, how we treated our heart, how we treated our life and our moments. All of those really crappy things we said, crappy things we did, and all of that is just there. It's already written. All of these moments, all of these years, they're already laid out. But we're going to be held to the truth. Like, could you speak to all that? Could you be forthright and say that I did this in my body, I did this in my mind, I did this to other people, I did this to my heart. I just want to carry on, right? And I've heard a lot of testimony about that, and so sharing more about that, I think, would be very helpful, for people. And I do hear that, but lovingly, the cultural part of the community, or the cultural community within the community, because of the way the world works and goes, I guess, they're not the majority. They are, for a lot of reasons nationwide, a lot of the cultural part of Native communities is becoming the minority. And that's a trend that I'm looking to turn around, and that requires instilling that sense of hope, instilling that sense of openness, trying to encourage more safety in words, safety in thoughts, that we need to just be open to hearing people's successes and hearing people's survival. That's where I was getting to. Hearing about people's survival and just appreciating it.
Yeah, solid answer. What role did mentors, elders, or cultural leaders play in helping you navigate life's difficult moments, especially as a young man?
I've learned so much from a lot of different folks, and learned, some things I'm still, I've heard them, but I'm still taking them in. I think a lot of it, I've shared, and yeah, there's something I was looking to even speak to, probably region wide, about something that's just been, it's just been on my heart. It's been on my mind, about things that our elders have cautioned us about, and people may not all agree, and I think it's a time to say some of that stuff, because if I wait too long, I'm not giving the community the ability to ask the elders themselves. So getting back to the last question, for instance, when we're sitting here making decisions to just throw a whole bunch of dirt on our light, right, to dim it our very selves, and we're just living life that way, just like stuck in addiction. And sadly, some of those decisions, they cut our life short, and I've been praying about, like, is it a form of suicide when you choose to remain in that world of addiction? There's a lot of help out there, there's a lot of self-help. And even at that, too, though, I shouldn't put that weight on people, because, like, we already went over guidance. There's a lot of people that are born into trauma, born into struggle, and And here we are saying, you just need to find your way, right? You just need to pray about it. You just need to, and there's just not enough people that are guiding our youth into that. And so for them to be stuck in addiction and for us to say they should have just figured it out. They should have just asked for help. They should have, and a lot of them don't know to ask for help. And so is it, and that's what I'm praying about. Like, is it suicide, right? Some think that, no, suicide is just when you choose to take your life right then and there. Yeah. Well, you are pretty much, you're putting your life at risk. You're putting your heart and your body at risk, and when you're making decisions to just throw a whole bunch of weight on your back, by using and abusing. It might be slow, but it's a slow suicide, right? So, and when it comes to suicide in the culture, there's rules and laws around that. Culturally, a lot of our folks have learned suicide happens when there's darkness that's surrounded your life. And so in that sense, when you're choosing to have darkness around your life every single day, how is that different than someone who chooses a single moment to end their life, because of darkness. So still got some praying to do about that, but that's kind of something that elders have talked to me about, at length years ago, about how we conduct services and ceremonies for those that have lived full lives, right? Those that have lived through those seasons, seen many seasons, and so at the time of their end, and at the time of after living a full life, then that they get a full ceremony for the respect, for the dignity, for the survival that they, shown, that they get a full service, ceremony and testimony and everything, So
I'm left speechless. I mean, dead on. You've spent a lot of time teaching and working with youth. What gives you hope about the next generation of Wasco and Warm Springs leaders?
Yeah. There's definitely a lot of Wasco students, and I got to give it up to our teachers back at home, that are teaching, Rain Circle Smith, Pam Cardenas, Tassana, Deanie Johnson, Lam Chayet, Valerie Switzler, and other Wasco teachers that maybe aren't being paid by a program to do it, but they're teachers, that are still keeping the culture alive. And the pride that the Wasco youth have, from those teachers that are there every single day, which doesn't include me, right? So I can't put myself even in that stature. I'm one of their students, and so going into leadership, that's kind of one thing I've been talking about at the YMU Center, about the pride and the strength of the Wasco Nation. Culturally, was very prevalent for a very, very long time with the language and the ceremonies and the culture and customs and heritage. And I'm not saying none of that exists, not whatsoever, because nationwide, worldwide, we've all been impacted by forced assimilation and genocide and things like that. But I think that being forthright of what we've been through, those struggles, those hurdles as a nation, I really absolutely believe that just being forthright, that we've definitely been through some tough times as Wasco people. And we can sit here and walk with a crutch, like, oh, poor me, poor my nation, poor my community, poor my Indian people. Oh man, poor, I'm a victim. I really don't need our youth playing that card. No, they need to wake up, and we need to be survivors. Like, no matter what happened yesterday, whatever happened last season, what happened last generation, now's the time. Now's the time, And I think the more our youth believe that now's the time, we need to pick ourselves up. We can't be sitting here asking someone else to apologize. We can't be expecting someone else to give us a handout. We just should say, there's an opportunity. I'm going to take it. I'm going to take it, and I'm going to use the absolute best of my ability to make the most of the day, most of the season, most of the moment. And it's all on me. I'm already waking up with a heart. I'm already waking up with a spirit. I'm already waking up with a body. It's on me. I'm going to make some good decisions. I'm going to show the Wasco people that I'm a Wasco, that I'm going to make great decisions. I'm going to show all my friends, my community, that I'm a Wasco, and no matter what has happened, no matter where I find myself, I'm going to be Wasco today. I'm going to be Wasco to the end, and this is the time. Right now is the time. So, and I believe that that our people are, thanks to our teachers, thanks to our youth. I think we're in for a pretty big surprise going forward.
Awesome. How do you balance carrying the pain of history while still moving forward with strength, pride, and purpose?
Yeah, I kind of just spoke to that. It is absolutely important to be reminded, that, our people have been through a lot, and we've got to be able to remember that our story isn't over. If you think a span, like they say, we've been here for 30,000 years, our people on this continent. In that 30,000, right, such a small moment of that, was with diseases and warfare and genocide and forced assimilation and trauma. And yeah, some of the trauma still exists today, and I think that we can reverse that. But that if you're looking over that whole span, it is for, these small increments of time. And that's what the first generations told us too. Like, we didn't have mountains erupting every single day. It's for a small moment of time. They say Earth is billions of years old. Not every mountain has erupted a billion times. You know what I mean? It's for these brief moments that we have in our histories and mountain histories. Even same for the plants. There's some plants that don't exist anymore. Or there's some that have prospered through many, many generations, seen different generations come and go, but they still came back. Their roots remember, their seeds remember, even to some of the animals. Some of our animals have seen many generations come and go, and it's just for those brief moments. And I think that our people also need to remember, like, no matter what, we're going to have some hard times, here and there, but you still got a season to come, still got a generation to teach. And so we're going to keep going. Yeah. So
what does sovereignty mean to you, not just politically, but spiritually and culturally?
So sovereignty is something we had well before contact with any non-natives and immigrants from, wherever. We already had sovereignty, and we still have sovereignty. That sovereignty was acknowledged even by the immigrants when they came. They came and they saw that we had societal structures, that we had family structures, we had ceremonial structures, all of that. And they acknowledged that we were societies. We were towns in their language, we were thriving cities, villages, etc. And that was all within sovereignty. They knew that we had leadership. They knew that we had a hierarchical way of going forward and prospering. So when they stepped forward to, offer these documents, that's what they're acknowledging, that we had that sovereign ability to acknowledge these documents, to sign and retain our sovereignty, retain our rights. And that's what's in our documents. So culturally, sovereignty is exercising our sense of place, our sense of identity, our sense of prosperity, our sense of person. Sovereignty is something we wake up with as well. And there's very minimal sovereignty, and then there's sovereignty on a large scale. And so, but yeah, we're going to exercise it, for generations, and we'll never give up our sovereignty when it comes to preserving our connection to the territory, our connection to our Creator, our connection to our first generations. And we also have a declaration of sovereignty. Warm Springs and the Confederated Tribes of Warm Springs, we are one of very few tribes that have an actual declaration of sovereignty that acknowledges everything that I just mentioned. That we'll always pray, we'll always humble, we'll always acknowledge, we'll always connect, and we'll always preserve, prosper, and revitalize anything we've ever lost. That it's on our nation to do that. So,
for listeners unfamiliar with your community, what's one misconception you'd like to correct, and what's one truth you want them to carry with them?
You don't get free money, and I would like them to know that we are here for the long run. Absolutely. And we ain't going nowhere. That's about as short as I can keep it.
I like that. Well, Jefferson, thank you for your honesty, your leadership, and your deep commitment to your people. Conversations like this remind us that healing is not only possible, it's powerful, especially when it's rooted in culture, language, and love for the next generation. To our listeners, if this episode moved you, we encourage you to stay curious, stay grounded, and until next time, take care.
Thank you.